Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm also going to cut down my speech a little bit, but thankfully I was just introduced, so that already reduces it by 3 paragraphs. So, as you've heard, I'm the editor of a website that translates blogs by Tibetans into English. As was mentioned before, I was working full-time on Tibetan issues, basically since I graduated from university. But despite working full-time, I felt that it was necessary to understand China in order to gain an insight into the situation on the ground in Tibet today. And that's why I decided to move to Beijing in 2006 to learn Chinese. So I was fortunate that during that time I could travel all over. I traveled to Tibet several times. But as everyone here will be aware of, Tibet erupted in widespread protests against Chinese rule just over 3 years ago, starting in Lhasa on 10th of March 2008. And for several months afterwards, the whole of Tibet was a media black hole, and no foreign journalists or tourists were allowed to travel in. And the whole area was under military lockdown. And despite promises of media freedom by the Chinese government in the lead-up period to the Olympic Games in August 2008, these promises were not kept in Tibet's case. And even though it's been over 3 years since those mass protests, the situation on the ground today has not improved. Recently, just prior to the 3-year anniversary of the protests, a travel ban was imposed on the Tibet Autonomous Region on March the 7th, restricting foreigners from traveling there, including media. Radio Free Asia reported on 25th February that police in Lhasa were cracking down on banned songs, searching mobile phones for MP3s that were deemed reactionary. According to a Tibetan in Lhasa, if someone has this type of song on their mobile phone, they're detained, jailed for 10 to 15 days, heavily fined, and even brutally beaten. Despite this fierce crackdown all over Tibet, the protests haven't stopped, and Tibetans continued to protest to voice their grievances throughout 2009 and 2010 against specific issues. For example, in May 2009, a peaceful protest by Tibetans in Kanze prefecture of Sichuan province against the construction of a hydroelectric dam leading to displacement of tens of thousands of local Tibetans was forcibly broken up by police with 6 people injured. In August 2010, at least 4 Tibetans were killed and 30 injured when police officers opened fire on a crowd outside the Payul County government offices in Kanze prefecture. Local Tibetans there were protesting the expansion of a gold mining operation damaging to the environment. And most recently, in October 2010, thousands of students in eastern Tibet took to the streets in support of Tibetan language against a new policy that would increase Chinese language medium teaching and undermine Tibetan language study. Since 2008, Tibetans have faced severe punishment for merely exercising their right to freedom of expression. According to the International Campaign for Tibet, more than 50 Tibetans, including 13 writers involved in the arts and public sphere, are either in prison, have been disappeared, or have faced torture or harassment for expressing their views. Under the circumstances, Tibetans today are finding new ways to assert their identity and resist passively, such as refusing to celebrate Losar, Tibetan New Year, in 2009, out of respect to all of those who lost their lives in 2008. Tibetans are also engaged in strategic non-violent resistance. There's a new movement called Lhaka, which is currently underway. Lhaka literally translates as White Wednesday, and it's considered an auspicious day as it's the sole day of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. A growing number of Tibetans are making a special effort to wear traditional clothes, speak Tibetan, eat in Tibetan restaurants, and buy from Tibetan-owned businesses every Wednesday. So my work today with High Peaks Pure Earth is dedicated to supporting Tibetan voices from inside Tibet and the People's Republic of China. Tibetans are fully capable of speaking for themselves, and their voices are often eloquent, extremely courageous. And it's important for these voices to be heard, represented, and amplified. New media has afforded many new opportunities for communication and exchange between Tibetans and the outside world, but this is not without risk. Blogs, social networking sites, microblogs, SMS, these are all being used by Tibetans as a forum of expression. And the most well-known figure for using these new technologies is the Tibetan writer and poet and blogger Wurse. We regularly translate her blog on High Peaks Pure Earth, and she's really a rare Tibetan voice because she's coming directly out of the PRC today. She's using her overseas hosted blog and social media such as Twitter through a proxy to make the true feelings and situation of Tibetans known today. And for this, she has been placed under house arrest. She's been harassed by the police several times, and her blogs, Skype, email, and Twitter have been hacked several times by Chinese nationalists. The Chinese government fear free exchange between their citizens, and especially between Tibetans. So it's no coincidence that prior to March the 10th last week, a prominent Tibetan social networking site, My Potala, was inaccessible suddenly, along with Tibetan language blog hosting sites Dubumnet and Sangdo. And these sites are still down today. Finally, I'd like to draw attention to the following cases of human rights violations related to freedom of expression. The first case is the case of Tunduk Wangchen, who was sentenced to 6 years in prison in December 2009 for making a documentary film called Leaving Fear Behind. And this documentary film interviewed ordinary Tibetans about their views about Tibet, China, and the Olympic Games. The second case is of two men, Wang Du and Mingma Tunduk, who were both NGO workers, and they were accused in 2008 of collecting intelligence concerning the security and interests of the state and providing it to the Dalai clique. Prior to and following the March 14th incident, Wang Du received a life sentence and Mingma Tunduk a sentence of 14 years. And the last case is the case of Nunzi Wangmo, who's a female writer from eastern Tibet. The exact charges against her are not known, but she was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison in November 2008 for passing news through the phone and internet about the situation in Tibet to the outside world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dechen.